So in my session today, what I wanted to do was provide some visibility over the activities of the International Accounting and Standards Board relating to digital financial reporting. So my session's focused on those activities broader than for recording.
Oh, okay. That's all right. No, that's all right. That's all right. First slap on the wrist. So just to provide some visibility over our digital financial reporting activities beyond maintaining and updating the taxonomy. So after my session, my colleague Jatin will provide an update on our taxonomy related activities. But I should also caveat that my session is focused on the accounting side. So I'm not speaking to the work of the International Sustainability Standards Board. So Owen, my colleague, in a separate session this afternoon, is going to provide an update on the work that we're doing in that space around the IASB taxonomy. So first slide, most important thing on the slide for the recording is the caveat at the bottom. So these views are my own personal views, don't necessarily reflect the views of the board. So make sure we get that in the recording. In terms of what I'll cover, I'll go through the IASB's current level of focus on digital financial reporting and how that's changed recently. I'll then look at the need for us to prioritize what we intend to do with digital financial reporting to help progress digital reporting globally. And then I will take you through a strategic framework that we've developed to help us think about how we prioritize the activities that we undertake and where we should focus. And then I'll get into what those priority activities are. So historically, the IASB's level of focus on digital reporting has primarily been on updating and maintaining the IFRS accounting taxonomy. There's also been a little bit of common practice review that goes on to create the common practice elements. But beyond that, there hasn't been a lot of other activities in the space. And about a year ago, the IASB undertook its third agenda consultation, which is a process to understand and prioritize the activities that the board should take. And as part of that agenda consultation, it received feedback from various different stakeholders saying that the IASB should actually increase its level of focus on digital financial reporting, given the growing importance of digital reporting to global capital markets. And so the IASB listened to this feedback and agreed to slightly increase its level of focus on digital reporting with the aim of improving the usefulness, quality, accessibility, and comparability of digital information. Now, in terms of what the slight increase in focus looked like, that then leads us to the need to prioritize. So the various different outreach activities that we've undertaken and also feedback that we received on the agenda consultation provided really a wide range of possible activities that we could undertake beyond taxonomy development. So some people said you need to look at spending time to enhance your taxonomy and improve navigability of the taxonomy, and that's what you should do with your slightly increased level of focus. Others took a much more, I want to say the word aggressive, but maybe not the right word, visionary approach, and said maybe the IASB should be the one to facilitate a global central repository so that you could have a single access point for accessing digital reports from all around the world. Other people also proposed suggestions such as looking at how you could use digital reporting to have a toggling ability so that preparers investors could consume information and toggle between different measurement bases. So that's quite maybe revolutionary and visionary. So there's quite a wide range of spectrum in terms of what their suggestions were. So recently, or possibly not as recently now, but in December 2022, the IASB discussed a strategic framework to help it think about what activities it should undertake, given its current level of resource and its expertise, and then to also help guide what priority activities it should undertake. And then at that meeting, they also then discussed those priority activities that were recommended by the staff that they should undertake from now through to 2026. So in terms of developing a strategic framework to help the board think through the digital financial reporting activities it should undertake, the staff asked 4 questions. And a lot of the questions and the answers will be nothing new to many people in this room, but it is part of the journey in terms of providing visibility over how we develop this framework. So what are the benefits of digital financial reporting? Again, probably nothing new here, but facilitates the automation and reduced search costs for investors, has traceback functionality to ultimately the underlying source documentation or the report itself. This can increase information processing efficiency, which leads analysts to be able to cover more companies and increase their investment targets. This then has flow-on consequences in terms of increased access to capital for companies and resulting in a lower cost of capital. And there are other benefits that we'll all be aware of too, as well as leveling the playing field for investors, assisting regulators in market oversight activities, assisting preparers with their benchmarking exercises. The list goes on. And more recently, John mentioned this morning in his welcoming statement around the recent report that came out of Deloitte Access Economics in Australia around how if they move to mandatory digital financial reporting requirements in Australia, it could increase the Australian economy by roughly £4 billion a year from 2030. And then two, newsworthy is in Korea. Korea is looking at how digital financial reporting can help solve the Korean discount that foreign investors place on Korean stocks. So the benefits are reaching a much wider audience now, and I think the momentum in digital financial reporting is starting to see a real shift. Then we asked ourselves, okay, so what are the current challenges that undermine these benefits? And again, none of these will be probably new to many in the room, but first of all, we have a fragmented global adoption of taxonomies. So you can have jurisdictions that are all using IFRS, so IFRS reporters in, let's say, Japan and the EU, but because they're not all using the same common taxonomy or the IFRS accounting taxonomy, digitally that information is not comparable. So comparable in a paper-based or a PDF format, but digitally not comparable. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is the ongoing challenges with data quality. And challenge number three is around accessibility of digital reports. So can we access all the information in digital reports? So in some jurisdictions, you're only required to tag the face of the financial statements or certain notes. So that means in a digital world, clearly the information that aren't required to be tagged is digitally inaccessible. You also have issues around, can you access the digitalized data? Is it publicly available, or does it sit behind a paywall, or it's possibly only available to regulators in a certain jurisdiction? And then finally, a really important point is around the timeliness of when you can access that information. So in some jurisdictions, there might be digital financial reporting requirements, but you're not required to submit or lodge your digital format version of your accounts until, say, 3 months after you've actually lodged the paper-based or the PDF version. And by that stage, the utility or use of that information to investors steeply drops off. We then considered where the world needs to be. So what is the vision? What is the IASB's vision for digital financial reporting? And the vision is ultimately decision useful, high quality, globally comparable, and accessible digital reports. And if we break that down, the characteristics of decision useful, high quality, and globally comparable, those are qualities or characteristics of financial reports that we have today in a paper-based or PDF world that are prepared in accordance with IFRS standards. So what the vision is really about in terms of digital is around the digital accessibility. And there's a lot of detail on the slide, but really in order for this information to be digitally accessible, it needs to accurately reflect the underlying information in a PDF format. It needs to accurately reflect in a digital format what's in the PDF filing, or ideally it'd be the same document. It needs to be digitally comparable. It needs to be complete, so the completeness point going to all the information needs to be tagged or digitalized that's made available. It needs to be publicly available. The timeliness aspects, so ideally it will be available as soon as any other format is available. And it also needs to be in a usable format. So can investors bulk download this information? Is it available on a central repository that can easily be accessible? Then we asked ourselves, so how do we get there? And so first of all, we believe that we need to have adoption of IFRS standards. And so these IFRS standards ultimately provide the comparability, whether in a PDF or a paper-based world or in a digital world. Then adoption of the IFRS digital taxonomies to support digital comparability. Then assurance requirements and enforcer reviews. And this is really to help address the data quality issues that are out there, and also to help emphasize the importance of discipline around the digitalization processes. So at the moment, quite often you may have situations where a company may outsource the tagging of their financial statements. That tag report then comes back to be reviewed, but it may not necessarily follow the same review process as the official PDF version of those financial statements, which might go through various staff members, management, and then possibly the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and ultimately signed off by the board. So that same level of discipline is often not occurring with digital financial reports. And then finally, there needs to be requirements that all the information in digital financial reports is digitally accessible in a timely format, and ideally made centrally available. So putting that all together in terms of developing the IASB's strategic framework, at the top sits the vision that we've talked about, and the IASB is quite conscious that achieving this vision will require a coordinated effort by multiple players in the digital reporting ecosystem. So this is something that the IASB alone cannot achieve. Then if we go down the next level, the IASB considered, okay, so what is our role to play in achieving this vision? And that's to facilitate the digital consumption of general purpose financial reports. So that's where the IASB identified their objective was. And then below that are three sub-components or three pillars. And that helped the IASB to think about the types of activities that it might undertake in the space. So the first being those activities that would ensure IFRS accounting standards remain fit for purpose in a digital world. The second around ensuring our accounting taxonomy is high quality and meets the needs of the market. And the third pillar being around those other activities that the IASB should play a role in, but can't influence the outcome themselves. So they will need to partner or influence other digital ecosystem stakeholders to achieve those activities. And this will make a little bit more sense once we start to talk through the activities. So then with that framework in mind, and with a large population of possible activities the IASB could undertake, we applied the framework and some other considerations to identifying what the key priority activities are that the IASB should undertake. And so under each of these pillars, the first one in terms of the IFRS accounting standards, the IASB is looking to make sure that the IFRS accounting standards remain fit for purpose in a digital world. And one of these activities that it will look to undertake is ensuring that when the standard setting teams are drafting disclosure requirements, they're considering the digital representation of those disclosures when they're being drafted. And so what this essentially means is the accounting standard setting team and the taxonomy team are working together on drafting disclosure requirements. Then the second part is making sure that we are aware or keeping track of how investors' needs are changing with an increasing level of consumption in a digital format, and then assessing how those needs, those changing needs, will have an implication on in terms of how we develop disclosure requirements in our standards. In the IFRS accounting pillar, so our activities will obviously include ensuring that we update and maintain the taxonomy for changes to IFRS accounting standards, and also for common practice reviews, and Jatin will talk a little bit more about this in his session. We're also looking at opportunities to make enhancements to the taxonomy. So for example, how we can better represent relationships and context in a digital format, how we can improve the navigability of the taxonomy, which could also include something as simple as providing a viewer on our website, and looking at enhancing data validation within the taxonomy. Then resource allowing, we would like to undertake some work to engage with stakeholders to identify what the current issues are in practice, and then identify those root causes. And when I talk about current issues in terms of applying the taxonomy, some of the root causes of data quality issues, to then see how we can better address those concerns where they are linked to how we develop our IFRS accounting taxonomy. We also have an ongoing activity, and that's the horizon scan for technical disruptors. And really the key goal of this activity is to make sure that if there are any new technologies that emerge that identify that the IFRS accounting taxonomy will no longer be needed in the future because it will be replaced by AI or something else, then we need to reassess, our work in this space. We don't want to be out there promoting a product if it's going to ultimately become redundant. So far to say, it seems that the taxonomy and AI are more complementary to each other than foes with each other. But I think Mark will probably touch on something like this in his presentation tomorrow or later today, I'm not sure, tomorrow. Then in terms of the third pillar, engaging with digital ecosystem stakeholders to progress the vision. So we have actively been engaging with different jurisdictions around the world to identify where they are on their digital financial reporting journey. So a lot of jurisdictions this is all new to, and they require capacity building materials, they require education in this space. Other jurisdictions are much more advanced with digital financial reporting, but maybe they have an approach that's less than optimal in the terms of a global accessibility of digital financial reporting. So working with those jurisdictions to help support them move to a more desired state. We're also looking at updating the guidance that we provide regulators. So we currently have a taxonomy adoption guide, but bring back the point that I was talking about in terms of jurisdictions that are early on in their digital financial reporting journey. We are conscious that with a lot of emerging economies looking to almost leapfrog straight over the paper-based reporting to digital, there is a steep learning curve there. So we are looking to develop some materials that are much more introductory. What is digital reporting? Why do you need a taxonomy? What does a taxonomy do, etc.? So part of that. But then also to learning from jurisdictions such as the US or the EU that have implemented digital financial reporting and understanding areas where guidance would have been quite helpful for them early on in the process to make sure that we update our taxonomy regulator adoption guide for that as well. And then finally, a really important activity to us is to work with international policymakers to encourage their support for or endorsement of our IFRS taxonomies. And so I say IFRS taxonomies, which leads on to the last point is this presentation I was largely focusing on the work of the International Accounting Standards Board, but a lot of these activities will also have a cross-pollination effect to the International Sustainability Standards Board. But at this point in time, the work of the International Sustainability Standards Board is primarily focused on developing the IASB taxonomy to ensure that that product can hit the market. I think the date is that they're aiming for is February 2024, so that those that are picking up the IASB S1 and S2 have the taxonomy available for adoption at the same time. And then at a later date, the IASB will consider the other activities it wants to undertake in the digital financial reporting space. So with that, I might just pause and see if there are any questions.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. My name is Gislain Fony from ETH Zurich. I have a question regarding the data modeling and the collaboration possibly with the open information model design. It's directly related to some of the items on the slides, like monitoring issues, engaging with the community. So I'm going to try to not make it technical. So many people know from inline XBRL that you basically put the numbers in a human readable document and you tag them with concepts. But when you analyze the data, there's other information in the taxonomy that is useful. That's the presentation network, the model structure, right? It's how you glue all of these values together. And the way that this is done has not been fully standardized yet, in the sense that IFRS is doing it in a certain way. In the US, in US GAAP, it's done in a slightly different way, the way that it's done. And I saw that in some of the filings that were reporting against IFRS, or directly or indirectly via other systems like the European Single Electronic Format. And for data analysis, the fact that there are these different practices of data modeling is technically a hurdle to analyze the data. So my question is it something that you are aware of? Are you also involved in the open information model, which I heard is working on also the standardization of all those hierarchies in the taxonomy? Is it something on your agenda as well?
That's a good question, and I might have to seek the input from my colleague from Jutton. Are you aware of the work that maybe Owen and the taxonomy team are looking at this space?
Thanks. Thanks for that question. So I think if I've understood your question correctly, it's how we model our taxonomy and how that is either consistent with how other taxonomies are modeled. And then from a user perspective, if there's different modeling approaches, how do you reconcile those differences? Right. Right. I think you've highlighted what is a big problem, because consistency is something that leads to a level of comparability amongst preparers and users. And I will chat to this in my presentation as well, but it's about identifying the modeling approaches that are straightforward for for preparers to apply, and then also for users to then understand and glean some information out of, so that there is a bit of a balancing act. Spoiler alert, that I will be chatting through that. But I think it's an ongoing problem. It's something that you will need to constantly grapple with to understand and improve the modeling approaches. And if you have any insights into that, then we'd really appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree in terms of, I think this would fall into on this slide, the identifying issues in practice and understanding the root causes. So I think that would be, we would love to hear more about that. So maybe Justin will pick up that offline.
Gilles Maguet, Xber Europe's Chief Executive Officer. In fact, at Xber Europe, we have made some white papers for the standard setters, and we have pushed for a common approach for developing the taxonomies. And in fact, we were speaking about some kind of a core architecture in order for the two organizations to develop something which is consistent enough for the users and for the preparers after to make their report. And so this is something that we would like to know if you are working on that at the moment with IFRAG, for instance, because it could be interesting. I don't know if IFRAG is working with you, or if you are working with IFRAG on this common approach. This is my question.
This is probably a better question for Owen in the IASB session, but definitely in terms of the ESRS and IASB taxonomy, there is a regular dialogue between the two organizations in terms of the development of their taxonomies, because I guess one of the common issues or topics is around interoperability between the ESRS data and the IASB data.
Do we have any other questions?
Hello, my name is Catalina. My question is regarding extensions. So we know we can extend the taxonomy, and I read a study from a Germany university that I don't remember the name right now, but they figure out there are some companies that they have 50% of extensions. So that means these extensions goes outside of the standards. How to deal with this? If is this plan to restrict some some kind of that, like, or I don't know, kind of suggest how we do that, because I think from the perspective of data analysis and comparison, this is a problem that we have.
Yeah. So to answer the question, no, in terms of plans to restrict the extensions, I think this is an example of an area that requires multiple stakeholders within the digital reporting ecosystem to take a role. Obviously, we do our common practice review to try and identify where there are common extensions and create common practice elements to avoid those or the need for extensions. But ultimately, we do have an open taxonomy, and it's hard to balance that entity-specific disclosure requirements and useful information. As part of the guidance that we're looking at developing, we are considering whether we provide more guidance around what regulators should provide to filers. So in terms of whether we should take a position on anchoring, which might help with extensions. But as you'll be aware, some jurisdictions at this point in time will require anchoring, some jurisdictions don't, so we also have to be conscious of that as well.
So you're saying you're working with ESMA, that's a good thing, because we had so many discussions about these extensions, anchoring, and also the block text of the notes. I hope you're going to work with ESMA to clarify these items.
Yeah, we have regular engagement with ESMA on a monthly basis, if not more regular. Yeah, ongoing.
Okay, one more question.
Yes, David, on your PowerPoint here, and you said this project until 2026. The middle of the IFRS accounting taxonomy. What's the difference between this taxonomy with the IASB taxonomy?
Sorry.
Because IASB, they also give us ESG taxonomy for the reporting. And here you have IFRS accounting taxonomy. Is any linkage or any difference between these two taxonomy, or that's the same thing?
Different taxonomies. And the primary reason for keeping them as separate taxonomies is because the IASB standards are gap agnostic. And so you could be in an environment where you pick up the IASB standards, so S1 and S2, but for example, you might be using US GAAP. And so by keeping the taxonomy separate, we were able to have a situation where you might pick up S1 and S2, also introduce digital financial reporting requirements, wanting to use the IASB taxonomy. But if you're not using IFRS accounting standards and you weren't looking at picking up the IFRS accounting taxonomy, it makes it a bit easier than if we were to combine them in a single taxonomy. So that was the reason for keeping them separate. Well, I think in terms of preparers, when they are tagging their financial statements, I would have thought relatively easy to import both taxonomies.
All right, I think we're at the end of time, and I know people have more questions, so maybe you can grab David at some point, and maybe we'll have time after Jatin's presentation to address some of these issues, because they're kind of interrelated with the taxonomy, that presentation that we're about to receive. So thank you, David. And we're going to introduce our next speaker.